After exhaustive review and looking at data and arguments on both sides of this critical issue, I want to stand before you today and share that I've heard from thousands of residents passionately expressing their opinions on both sides of this issue. I've spoken personally to experts in veterinary care, animal care and control, as well as residents of our city who have had experiences, both good and bad, with pit bulls. After deep reflection and consideration, I made a phone call this afternoon to Councilman Chris Herndon, the sponsor of the bill, and share with him that I cannot support the ordinance that was passed by City Council on Monday. And I've exercised my authority as mayor to veto the ordinance. Let me just start by thanking Councilman Herndon, who tried to craft legislation that creates data, a data and licensing system for these breeds that is supported by veterinary experts and encourages owners of pit bull breeds to manage their pets. Unfortunately, today in Denver, less than 20% of all pets in Denver are currently licensed, which raises significant questions about the effectiveness of this proposed new system. And this is a city that absolutely loves dogs. While much progress has been made in this system in recent years that has increased the numbers, more intentional effort around responsible pet ownership, dog licensure, and registration and dealing with off-leash dogs are needed before this proposal should be considered in Denver. Here's the reality. Irresponsible pet owners continue to be a problem. And it is the irresponsible owners and their dogs I must consider in evaluating the overall impact of this ordinance. I cannot diminish nor can I dismiss the very real, traumatic experiences of people who contacted me and are part of the overall record of the attacks by these dogs. Again, I want to say I appreciate the effort Councilman Herndon has put in to crafting this ordinance and the guardrails that he put up. I do not believe this ordinance fully addresses the very real risk to severe injury from attacks from these dog breeds. And I asked the question that really came down to my decision, and whether the passage of this ordinance would make our homes and neighborhoods safer or posed an increased risk to safety. And I concluded from the data as I was looking at it that it would pose an increased risk in Denver. And so I encourage members of City Council to reconsider their approach to this ordinance. And I just kept thinking that if this were to become a law in our city and harm comes to someone as a result, then we would have done a disservice to the people of Denver. And so that's my statement. I'll open up for question and answer at this time.
Was there any personal story, individual story that moved you to make this decision today?
There were, this was an amazing week. After the passage on Monday night, immediately began to pour over data again, the articles that I had amassed prior to, as the proposal was being looked at by council. But on Wednesday or Tuesday morning, I think it was, I woke up and the very first message when I picked up my phone was from a friend in California showing me about the 5-year-old that had been attacked by a suspected pit bull breed and killed. And that story just stopped me in my tracks almost immediately. It may have been Wednesday morning when it happened. And then, of course, we had the subsequent issue in Chicago. And then, in talking with and reflecting back in 1989, I was in college when this passed, and thinking about what were the triggers, and thinking about the 2-year-old who lost his life that made council and the mayor at the time, Federico Pena, decide that was the last straw. So I have a lot of documents, a lot of pictures that are unseemly in terms of people who were attacked that were very traumatic to look at. But I'll tell you that the difficulty in the numbers of the fatal attacks by pit bulls was really one of the things that stuck with me as I kept going back and forth on whether or not I would sign this legislation.
You talk about some personal stories that affected you.
Yeah, go ahead.
You get it?
I think I caught it.
3 questions. Councilman Herndon's statement that just came out said that basically disregarded the science that was presented in this one.
Yeah.
And I heard you reference science. I also heard you reference feeling. I'm trying to get a sense if you feel like this decision was made based on, I'm going to ignore the silence, but I'm going to disregard the science and go on gut feeling. You don't want something to happen on your watch.
Actually, the absolute opposite. In fact, I try to put away my personal experiences. I try to put away my gut. He knew from day one that I had issues with the attempt to repeal. He and I have been talking about this for a couple of years, by the way. Someone I tremendously respect. I knew this was coming from him for quite some time. In fact, I try to put all that away. I read over 900 pieces of emails from residents, calls to my office. I read voluminous amounts of data and information, and then, quite frankly, I said this from the onset, there were valid arguments on both sides. And I think, quite frankly, that was what was different about me entering into this process. I said, I'm going to be open. I'm going to try to release all this and just think about, let the information come to me. There are valid arguments on both sides of this issue. And I'll tell you, I did not make up my mind until about 1:30 this afternoon when I called staff in and said, this is what we're going to do.
If you were on the fence for that long, was there a part where you also said, it sounds like I'm reading so much on both sides, I just don't want something to happen on my watch. I don't want to be the mayor that says, okay, let's do this.
That plays a part in it. Here's the reality. So I look at the suspected fatalities or fatalities from suspected breed of pit bulls. I could not get past that number. That, certain years, 60+% of the fatalities are caused by suspected pit bull breeds. I could not get past that number. It kept coming back to me. When I think I can move forward with signing this and bring broader ideas to the table in terms of other things we need to focus on, that number kept coming back to me. And the fact that, all dogs bite. All dogs could potentially attack, but there is a breed of dog, and I believe in this. Suspected pit bull breeds have a greater impact in their attacks. And reading letters and information from pediatricians, emergency room physicians were very compelling to me.
You've done the math, sir. At this point, you don't believe council will override your veto?
I hope council takes a relook at this and to reconsider its position with regards to this ordinance and really think about how we can take the steps to address the issues that also surfaced for me during this process, and that is we're not doing a very good job in licensure in this city and registering our pets. We're not doing very good with making sure the dogs stay on their leashes or are not running them out about our cities. If you read or look at your Nextdoor app, the notices we get, I would bet 2/3 of them are about dogs who are running loose in your neighborhood. And so we've got to work on those issues before we even take a serious look at this pit bull ban. And I hope City Council will do that.
You talked about being concerned with less than 20% of dogs being licensed in the city. So realistically, what would that percentage have to be for you to revisit repealing ban?
You know what? I don't know what that is, to be honest with you. We know that it's a challenge across the nation as we've looked at it and looked deeper. But let me say this. I think that there are some things that we can do as a city to remove those barriers from residents registering their dogs. I believe on the most part, majority of the residents of this city are dog-loving people like myself who care for their dogs and take good care of their dogs. And quite frankly, their dogs are peaceful dogs. But we got to make sure we're doing right by registering them. We know where they are, and if they are found loose, that they are returned appropriately, but also that they are not running loose. And that's the critical piece of this, is to make sure that we're finding ways and mechanisms to address that. And I think there's some creative ways we can go about addressing that.
I think you might have some folks who aren't going to agree with you on this decision.
There will be a lot of people not agree with me on this situation.
But on that 20% point of not up to like 20% in the city are even registered, because then we don't really know what we're dealing with. And
Right.
by that argument, you might say really no dog in this city is going to keep people safe. I mean,
Well,
how would you counter that?
Here's the reality. The key part of this is that people register their pit bulls. And if we're already challenged with registering dogs in general, why would we think people are going to register their pit bulls? And so in a city that is growing as fast as we are, a city that's becoming more dense as we are, it does not make sense for us to add more dogs. Common sense tells you as we add more people, we're going to have more dogs, and potentially, and now that we allow pit bulls, we're going to have more pit bulls. And if I believe that pit bulls, bite just like any other dog, but also have a greater impact when they bite and have a greater impact when they attack someone or another animal, then why would I do that unless I have better controls in terms of registration and off-leash elements. And so those are the things that I want to focus on more broadly as a city, and that came to our attention while we were looking and deliberating on this issue and in conversations with animal control. I think and believe in my heart we can do better. I've already sent the order to Bob McDonald and Public Health and Environment, said we need to look at this and let's get to work on it right away.
Let's follow up on the popularity of this decision. How do you feel like most of Denver feels about this? And then follow up to that question.
Well, you know what, let me just say this. I believe people in Denver love their dogs. I love my dogs. And I believe people are asking the question, why do we have, a lot of people are asking the question, why we have this breed-specific ban. In a conversation with one of our city council members today, he said, you know, the interesting thing, those of us who were here don't have any problem supporting the ban, who were here in 1989, 1988. We know what was going on in Denver. We saw the trend, the successive number of bites and attacks by pit bulls. We saw elderly lady get hurt. We saw a young boy get killed, a 2-year-old kid die. We don't have a problem supporting this. You know, what we need to do is continue to educate people why that fear is existing, in addition to the data that's out there regarding the fact that breed-specific bans are ineffective according to a lot of data that we read, and then figure out how do we find a more a middle ground at the same time addressing the challenges that we have. And so I think there's an opportunity in this. We don't have the opportunity to build it up right now in the midst of the clock ticking in terms of a veto or signage. But my goal and my focus of the team is going to be to address those issues.
So the follow-up to that is, Denver is a very different place today than it was in the 80s.
Yep.
Would you support this going to the voters?
You know, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but I never have a problem with voters weighing in on issues.
Would you support it if voters get the option to weigh in?
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but if it goes to the voters, it goes to the voters, and we'll let the people weigh in. But I think, you know, ultimately, we have an opportunity to take a look at this from a broader perspective with regards to how we exercise our animal control in the city of Denver.
You said you've already directed staff to look into this. What does that look like to you? More enforcement?
You know, how do we increase the numbers of registrations? So, and you know, how do we make it seamless for residents? How do we remove barriers? What are the barriers? Why are we stuck at? I shouldn't say stuck because it's been increasing, but why are we at 20%? And what's an ideal number? I think there's a great deal of conversation. And then when we heard from residents who came down here, not only yesterday but during the city council hearing, why do we have some neighborhoods where we're having a lot of dogs who are running off leash? And you know, quite frankly, in some neighborhoods where dogs are just off leash and people are walking their dogs and their dogs are attacked. I saw it on one of your networks, the story on one of the networks last night. These are things that we have to address, and I think that we need to have those kind of very substantive conversations before we talk about lifting this ban in our city.
With this difficult decision for you today, did you give a message for the pit bull supporters or owners out there that in the city or outside of the city or in this, you know?
Well, I hope they appreciate and understand the real complexity of this decision for me as the mayor. I have a tremendous concern in terms of the competing data that's out there. You know, I will tell you, I spoke with people from coast to coast about this issue, elected, not elected, people who are dog lovers, some people who are not, and it was as varied as we find in terms of our consideration here. But I think foundationally there are some things that we need to work on before we turn our attention to releasing or bringing more pit bulls into our city. I do have a concern. I grew up in the city and I know why that ordinance was proposed in 1988, 89. And I am still concerned about it because a lot of those, we're still seeing those attacks across the country.
You surprised third term? This is your first veto?
I was hopeful that we would never have a veto in 12 years. This is not an easy decision. I didn't take it lightly. And, you know, the fact that it's also Chris Hernan, someone who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, who did a lot of work on this. And he did this right. He was transparent from day one on his interest in this. He worked hard on it. I know he did. That weighed on me as well. This is a very, very difficult decision. And it was a tough call to make to him today. You know, and we had a good conversation, though a tough conversation. So, again, I don't know if you come into this office hoping to veto anything. I certainly didn't, and hoped that I would walk out of here in 12 years having never vetoed a piece of legislation. Compromise is what we work toward here.
One more question.
Anyone else?
That's it. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, guys, thank you.